If death isn't the end, why are we scared? The Buddha's answer. Take a moment and think about this. One day, our bodies will stop working. That is a fact. Just like the sun rises and sets, life begins and ends. But if death is natural, why do we fear it so much? This fear goes beyond the body. It is something deeper. We are afraid of what comes after. Is it complete nothingness? Or is there something waiting for us beyond what we can imagine? And what about everything we love? Our family, our memories, our dreams? Will they simply vanish? For thousands of years, people have searched for answers. Philosophers, scientists, religious teachers. Each has tried to explain what happens when we die. Some believe in an afterlife. Others say death is the end. But no answer seems to truly remove our fear. Yet, more than 2,500 years ago, the Buddha offered a perspective that is both profound and practical. He did not ask us to blindly believe in something magical. Instead, he invited us to look deeply into our own experience, to examine reality itself. And through that understanding, we might find a way to live without fear. Chapter 1. What exactly are we afraid of? Death is the great unknown. It is like standing at the entrance of a dark cave. You cannot see what is inside. You do not know if it is safe, or if something is waiting in the darkness. And that uncertainty, that not knowing, is what creates fear. But what exactly are we afraid of? For most, core fear isn't the physical process, but the perceived annihilation of the I, the self we believe ourselves to be, vanishing like a candle flame. Imagine a child holding a balloon. She loves it. She watches it float in the air, bright and full of life. But then, the balloon slips from her fingers and disappears into the sky. She cries, not just because the balloon is gone, but because something she thought belonged to her has been lost forever. In the same way, we hold on tightly to our sense of self, our identity, our memories, our achievements. We fear that when death comes, all of it will slip away, just like the balloon. This fear is not new. People have struggled with it for centuries. The Greek philosopher Epicurus once said, "Death is nothing to us. When we are here, death is not. When death is here, we are not." It sounds logical, doesn't it? If we do not exist to experience death, then why should we fear it? And yet, logic alone does not remove the fear, because deep down, we do not just see ourselves as a collection of thoughts and experiences. We feel that we are something more, something too real, too important, to simply vanish. Now think about a wave in the ocean. It rises, travels forward, and then disappears. Where does it go? Does it stop existing? No. The wave was never separate from the ocean in the first place. It was always just water, moving in a certain shape for a certain time. The French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre had a different view. He believed that life has no inherent meaning. We must create our own purpose. And if that is true, then death is terrifying because it erases everything we have built. All of our struggles, our dreams, our efforts, it all ends in silence. That is why we try so hard to leave a mark. We write books, build businesses, have children. We want to be remembered, to prove that we were here. But even memories fade, and everything we create will one day be gone. But the Buddha challenged this very notion of a fixed, permanent I. he asked a different question. What if this I we fear losing was never really there in the way we think? This is not about denying life or pretending death does not matter. Instead, it is an invitation to look deeper, to examine who we really are and what it truly means to exist. And in that understanding, there may be a way to find peace. Chapter 2. Does death really mean the end? When we think about death, we often imagine it as a final, absolute ending, a complete erasure of existence. But is that truly the case? Or is this perception shaped by our limited understanding of what it means to exist? The Buddha did not define life and death in the way we commonly do. To him, death was not the annihilation of being, but the continuation of a process. One that has been unfolding long before we were born, and will continue long after we are gone. In Buddhism, life and death are two sides of the same reality, inseparable, like the inhale and exhale of a breath. Consider fire. A flame burns brightly, consuming the wood, giving warmth and light. And then, eventually, it goes out. But what has truly ended? The heat from the fire is absorbed into the air, the light has traveled outward, and the smoke rises into the sky. The fire, in one sense, has disappeared, but in another, it has simply changed form. The fear of death is deeply rooted in the fear of the unknown. But in Buddhism, the unknown is not something to be feared. It is something to be understood. The Buddha taught that clinging to life as though it were fixed and permanent leads to suffering. But so does clinging to the idea of death as a total negation of existence. Instead of asking, what happens after death? The Buddha encouraged a different question. What is happening right now? By focusing on the present, we can directly observe the constant flux that is life and death, happening simultaneously. If we observe closely, we see that the body is constantly dying and renewing itself. Old cells vanish, new ones are created. The mind, too, is in constant motion. Thoughts arise and pass away. Emotions come and go. Just as a river is never the same river from one moment to the next, yet we still call it the river. So too is our existence a continuous flow. We can see this impermanence everywhere if we choose to really look. The seasons shifting, the leaves changing color. Even in technology, we get a new phone and not too long after, a newer model comes out. This process of arising and fading is not something that begins at the moment of death. It is happening every single moment of our lives. This is why in Buddhist practice, deep meditation is often compared to dying before death. Not in a morbid way, but in the sense of letting go of illusions, shedding the false sense of permanence and control. Those who have truly understood this often face death with peace, not because they have found certainty about an afterlife, but because they have seen through the illusion of an absolute beginning and an absolute end. So, does death really mean the end? Or is it simply another moment in the great unfolding of existence, like the setting sun that somewhere else is already rising? Chapter 3. Why do we suffer in the face of death? If death is a natural part of life, why does it bring so much suffering? The answer lies not in death itself, but in the way we perceive it. Suffering arises when we resist reality, when we cling to things that, by their very nature, cannot be held forever. At its core, suffering is a result of attachment. We attach to our bodies, relationships and identities, clinging to the illusion that they are permanent, This clinging is the root of our suffering when faced with their inevitable change. Imagine a person holding a handful of sand. At first, they hold it gently, and the sand rests in their palm. But then, fearing they might lose it, they grip it tightly. What happens? The sand slips through their fingers even faster. This is the nature of attachment. It does not preserve what we love. It only makes the loss more painful. Death is a mirror that forces us to confront impermanence. It reminds us that everything we cherish, our youth, our relationships, our successes, will one day be gone. And because we are not prepared to accept this truth, we suffer. Some try to avoid thinking about death altogether, distracting themselves with work, entertainment, or ambitions. Others try to escape it through belief, hoping for an afterlife that will preserve their identity. But no matter how much we avoid or deny, death remains an undeniable truth. However, suffering does not come from death itself. It comes from our refusal to see things as they are. When we believe that our existence should be permanent, that love should last forever, that we should always be who we are now, we create expectations that reality cannot fulfill. And when those expectations are broken, we feel pain. As the Buddha said, all conditioned things are impermanent. When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering. Buddhism teaches that the way to reduce suffering is not to avoid death, but to understand it. When we truly see that everything is impermanent, not just in theory, but in our direct experience, we begin to loosen our grip. We realize that just as a flower blooms and withers, just as the seasons change, so too do we. And when we stop resisting this natural flow, suffering fades. Imagine losing a cherished object. If we understand impermanence, we might still feel sadness, but we won't be consumed by the belief that we should have kept it forever. We acknowledge the loss, appreciate the time we had with it, and allow ourselves to move on. In Buddhism, what we often cling to as our self is actually a collection of 5 aggregates: form, sensation, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. These are constantly changing, and none of them constitute a permanent, unchanging I. This does not mean we should be indifferent or emotionless. It is natural to grieve when someone we love passes away. It is natural to feel sadness when facing loss. But there is a difference between pain and suffering. Pain is a part of life, an inescapable experience. But suffering is the extra weight we add when we refuse to let go. So why do we suffer in the face of death? Because we see it as an enemy, as something that takes everything away. But what if instead we saw it as a teacher? One that reminds us to live fully, to appreciate each moment, and to let go of the illusion of permanence. When we truly understand this, death is no longer something to fear. It is simply the next wave returning to the ocean, the next breath dissolving into the air. And in embracing this truth, we find serenity. Chapter 4. The Final Answer. Why we shouldn't fear death. Everyone knows that one day we will die. But instead of facing this truth, many of us push it away. We stay busy, distracted, and pretend that death is far away. But deep inside, the fear remains. The Buddha did not teach us to ignore death. He taught us to look at it clearly. Instead of seeing it as something dark and frightening, he showed that understanding death can bring wisdom and freedom. When we stop running from it, we start to see life in a new way. We begin to ask, What truly matters? How should we live so that, when the time comes, we have no regrets? Death is not the end of everything. It is a part of the natural cycle of life. Just as a fruit ripens and falls from the tree, just as the sun sets after a long day, life follows its own path. Understanding this helps us not only to face death without fear, but also to live more fully. One day, a young man named Suba came to the Buddha with a question that troubled him deeply. He asked, "Why do some people die young while others live long? Why do some live in suffering while others experience happiness?" He wanted to understand why life seemed so unfair. The Buddha gently explained that life and death do not follow human desires. Just as a farmer cannot control the wind or the rain, we cannot control when death comes. But what we can control is how we live. Instead of asking why death happens, we should ask, what can I do with the time I have? This story teaches us that death is not unfair. It is simply part of nature. Think of a candle burning in a dark room. Some candles burn longer than others, but all will eventually fade. The flame may go out, but the warmth and light it gave do not disappear. They remain in the people who were touched by it. In the same way, our bodies may pass, but the kindness, wisdom, and love we share continue in ways we may never fully see. So, how should we live if we know we will die? The Buddha's answer is simple. Embrace the present. Cherish each moment. Find joy in the everyday. Live with intention. Do not wait to appreciate the people around you. Do not waste time in anger, greed, or regret. Every moment is precious, not because it will last forever, but because it won't. When we accept impermanence, we stop clinging to things that cannot stay. We learn to enjoy life as it is, without fear. This does not mean we ignore grief or pretend we do not feel sadness when someone we love passes away. It is natural to feel pain, just as it is natural for clouds to bring rain. But suffering comes when we refuse to let go. If we hold on to loss, we create more pain for ourselves. Instead, we can honor those who have passed by, living with kindness and wisdom. The Buddha, in the Dhammapada, once said, "Neither in the sky, nor in the middle of the ocean, nor in the deepest mountains, is there a place where one can escape death. Trying to avoid death only makes us anxious. But when we understand it, we live without fear." Imagine waking up each day without worrying about the future. Imagine living each moment without regrets about the past. When we stop fearing death, we begin to appreciate life in a new way. We see beauty in small things: the sound of the wind, the warmth of the sun, the kindness of a stranger. We focus on what truly matters. Impermanence is not something to be feared, but a constant reminder of the preciousness of life. And when our time comes, we do not meet death with fear, but with peace. We understand that just as the sun sets to rise again, just as the river flows without stopping, so too does life continue. And when we understand this, we are no longer trapped by fear. We accept change with a calm mind without holding on or running away. Instead of worrying about what will happen, we focus on living fully and appreciating each moment. By understanding death, not as an ending, but as a natural part of the continuous flow of existence, we can truly begin to live fully, fearlessly, and with profound appreciation for the precious gift of life.